Today we are moving on. Siddhant gave us his work. We're gonna have a look at his work. And I haven't seen your work. Well, briefly in but we're gonna try to, just an example to see if we can actually retopologize the bust and bring it into Maya, which should be pretty forgiving if you attended yesterday. I think it should be okay. Did you watch the ZBrush Summit sculpt off? Everyone? I heard Jessica gave a shout out to Norway. Did you post pictures? From, did they comment on it? I didn't watch the whole. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We have a connection to LA. Yeah, Jessica was here a few years back at An Action. She's a friend of mine way back in my LA days. It's a pretty cool event. You should all watch it if you're into sculpting. So you'll be doing the B123 thing whole weekend, right? Okay. Very cool. Uh, oh yeah, yeah. There's everything. Usually, toy production, game studios, VFX studios, or just conceptual studios. So, do you have any questions from yesterday, or anything, or something you want me to show you? If yeah, if there are no pressing concerns, I think we're just gonna open your work, sir, and we'll have a look and see if we can basically just apply some of the things we were doing yesterday to an actual bust. So, which one should we use? What's the coolest one? Colored. Yes, if you save your files without the undo steps, the file sizes will be smaller. You could save one version with all the undo steps so that you have it, and then save another one, kind of that iteration, you know, it's just easier to work with. So I didn't finish watching the sculpt off of, did they have like, they were using Keyshot, I guess, quite a lot. All of them. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, okay. But they announced the winner yet, or no? There will be. Oh, okay. Was there an obvious winner, or no? It's pretty impressive to see what they can do in like a couple hours. Uh huh. 15 minutes. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty fun to watch. Nice. I'm gonna delete your undo history, sir. Now you can see your work, though. Maybe if we scroll back. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, you can have ZBrush create a movie for you as well. if you want to look into that. ZBrush can actually generate a movie based on all this history, and you will get a time lapse of all your work. So that's pretty cool. Sweet. Is it a fan art based on something? Isn't? Yeah, it kind of looks like. Yeah, yeah. Excellent, excellent. And I'm just gonna go like that. So if you press P, we can enter perspective or not. Sometimes it's beneficial not to be in perspective, so just to read everything. And then obviously for proportions, you do want to turn it on sometimes. So yeah, we haven't really, I mean, yeah, you paid attention to anatomy. We're using some references. It's cool. So I don't think we're gonna comment too much on the anatomy, or it looks cool. So we haven't really talked too much about anatomy at all. We could do that. But you're taking art classes. Do you have some anatomy there? No, no. That's good. That's good. Yeah. To start, I mean, it's also helpful, I think, just to have at least like a superficial understanding of musculature. So, like, yeah, anatomy. Like if you look at a torso, so just the superficial musculature to understand like what is actually making out the contours that we're looking at. See if we can find a nice image. Um, oh well. So there's this large muscle group. Anyone knows what it's called? The trapezius. So you have like upper, middle, lower. This is this large group of muscles. That's sort of what you're seeing here, like in the back. So that's kind of what makes out this. That would be the upper trapezius. So this is a bulky dude. So he would probably have like pretty pronounced upper trapezius. So that's what's making out that contour, right? That's why we're seeing that. And this musculature here, which you've placed pretty good, the sternocleidomastoid, see it attaches up by the ear and then goes down and crosses down and attaches here at the clavicle. See, uh, yeah, so we have no nice images. So when you're sculpting, typically you can just exaggerate these a little bit. So here's the sternocleidomastoid here. So it literally does that. So its function would be, to pull your head that way, that way. So, I mean, just to see where they attach, where they end up, and where they flow, at least these superficial, you see the orbicularis oris around the mouth, and we would have seen here, they've just taken it away, but we have a muscle here, which is also circular. So, I mean, just at least don't be afraid to Google anatomy and just look at some of these superficial, uh, the superficial musculature, and then sometimes just try to at least sit down and do a superficial pass of all these muscles. I mean, I think it's a very useful exercise, which would take you like half an hour the first time you do it, and then it would benefit you just infinitely. So there's a like a a way to sculpt, which is to basically build everything up by muscles. So some people do that. So you start with the interior and just build it out. I don't really do that. I'm just the kind of there are all these different approaches, but I think whichever you do, whatever you do, you should just at least have a basic understanding of musculature. Even though you're doing only observational drawing, if that's really great if that's what you're doing. But then I would argue also have a look at anatomy. So cool. So this is currently of Dynamesh Dude. It has around 300,000 polys, 287,000. And we have some subtools, we have some eyeballs. Okay. Did anyone try the extract feature? Like you can make a mask and then extract? Yes, 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 yes. So this is pretty cool. So if I copy this, you can make a mask, just use the mask pen or anything, and then spend some time making the mask. Once you have the mask where you want it to be, like if you're making a garment or like some accessory, clothing, whatever, you can extract it. So now it extracts it based on that mask. I hit accept. There, it will tear that off as a separate subtool. Now I have a separate subtool. I can delete that copy I just made. It's masked, which is kind of nice because I can initially then go in and smooth a little bit on the edge here if I want. So you very quickly make that clothing. So probably he would be much less defined, right? So you could smooth that out. Let's see. There's a smooth, stronger brush. This initial smooth brush is a little, see, it has little effect because this is relatively high, like 300,000. So I could go into comma, the light box. We have more brushes here. And there are even more brushes than would be in your standard, like the brush palette. So if you press comma, go to brushes, here you have more brushes. If you go to smooth, here are various smooth brushes. You have smooth stronger. I'll double click that. Okay, so now this will be the default smooth brush. If I use it, you see that it just has much more, yeah, it's basically much stronger, which it promises to be. So I would just, work on this, make it look like garment. If you're really into, it's a nice exercise as well. Like uh, observe a little bit how drapery, like the way cloth folds and cloths, how they would actually form in clothing. There are books on this, but essentially you look for points of tension, like where are the points where the cloth is resting and where is it flowing, and then I mean also just visually you can observe various kinds of drapery, also depending on the fabric. What type of fabric is it? Is it light or heavy or thick? Is it leathery or she would have much thicker folds and fewer, or is it silk or it's just whatever you're doing, just try to get into the habit eventually of looking at some references because it will really just improve your workflow, I think. It's pretty obvious examples, a point of tension and then just flowing. Let's see. Yeah, and also the directionality and drapery. So this would be a top there. I forget the name of the book. I can post if you're interested. uh, have you heard of Marvelous Designer? You tried it? So Jessica, incidentally, the one who's doing the commentating on the sculpt off, she spends a lot of her time in Marvelous. She basically does cosplay design as well. She designs clothing. which is really helpful because you have an understanding of sewing patterns and the way you would actually design fabric for production. And this is essentially what you need to do in Marvelous. So you design patches of clothing and then use physics to actually drive the uh, gravity will actually pull the fabric down, and based on the elasticity and the thickness of the fabric, it will generate folds. So again, if you're there are all these subsets of interest that you could dive into, like hair simulation, cloth simulation, all these things. But for general artists, also, I think Marvelous could be interesting. Personally, I've only kind of briefly tried it, and I don't think we have it on the labs. But you could definitely sculpt cloth. So, I mean, a lot of the examples you'll look at, a lot of people just, especially for conceptual sculpting, uh, oh yeah, they were doing a lot of cloth work. What's that? Oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll have a look at it. But you could really sculpt very convincing cloth just by sculpting and just adding, adding folds. So there's a little fold brush, so BFO. It's not magic. All it does is that it has like lazy mouse enabled. I think, did we mention lazy mouse? I think we did. So under the stroke palette, there's a feature called lazy mouse. This will just average out the stroke so that you see that I have this little red line. It is averaging out my pen strokes so that the line becomes smoother. So it's just a little bit easier to get these nice flowing folds. So depending on the fabric, and then I could erase them. So they would sort of recede back, but be flowing from points of tension. So essentially, keep noodling away with this. And essentially, you could arrive at some convincing uh, fold folds eventually. Takes work and patience, or you can sculpt, just literally be sculpting folds. Like you don't have to use that specific brush. Just like keep like clay buildup, for instance. Just keep like I would have some references up and just keep. Okay, so that's the smooth stronger. Let's turn down the C intensity quite a bit. The smooth stronger brush is very nice, like when you're starting to deal with a bit heavier mesh, because you can also turn it down. Like if you turn the smooth stronger brush way down on the C intensity, it's still pretty subtle, but then if you apply more pressure, it would just be more efficient. So yeah, anyways, so let's see how can we, basically I'm just going to do the same thing we did yesterday, retopologize this guy. First of all, let's look at how could we do it manually, which would be sending it to Maya and using Quad Draw. I'm not going to sit here and do and retopologize it in Maya because it would bore you to death and it would take a while to do it. But maybe just start and you'd sort of get the idea. It could potentially take a while, depending on. So what's his name again? I'm going dude. There. So there's the OBJ. Yeah, Marvelous Designer is pretty cool. You can also animate in there now. I think if you want to do like simple simple simulations. I mean, if you yeah, I guess if you had like simple projects, you could actually do your cloth sim in Marvelous, which is interesting.
This was one of the trickiest things to try and figure out. All right, guys. So the main tool for how to
Yes.
you want to go to the
Ah,
pose and end
okay.
section right now. I'm shorted. Now from garment, copy, which is and we put
Yeah,
a
never mind. So you can change the parameters, like the physical properties of the cloth, and it just uses yeah, the physics engine to drive it. So it's very interesting. I wish I would look more into that. So there's all these things, and the cool thing is once you just have the basic confidence working with a mesh, exporting here and there, you know, it's all kind of familiar. You could familiarize yourself with various tool sets pretty easily. Which I encourage you to have that mindset. Just kind of be curious. Where's the dude? So it's placing it there, so it's just kind of a random placement in the world space. If you really wanted to be specific about the scale, uh, okay, so this version of ZBrush is better at this. I guess now you can actually do this quite accurately in ZBrush. I don't know how to do that. But ZBrush used to be pretty bad with scale. so So actually what I used to do is to do the scale in Maya. So I could do measuring, probably I'm not going to necessarily do that here, but if if you say you'd have what's the dimensions of the head, like uh, if you do like 30 centimeter, 40 centimeter cube, that would, gives you the ballpark of where you'd need to be for the scale. So it would actually need to be more or less, yeah, bigger. So that's actually kind of important if you're meaning to light it and render it for VFX. So the way I would do that, I would actually rescale it here, and then pay attention to the scale value, right? That would be, or just export everything at once, like all the subtools, scale everything, and then import everything back to ZBrush, which is, it's just an OBJ. I mean, it used to be a Dynamesh sculpt, now it's really just an OBJ that has a lot of polys. And you export everything back to ZBrush, and that's your new starting point, right? And then everything will be to scale. So yeah, I'm just gonna mention that. So anyways, so the way we did this then would be to make it live. So press here, now it's live. I can't select it anymore, but anything I do now will snap to the mesh. Oops. So control space bar, you can do full screen. So I'm going to use quad draw tool. And again, we can do a search for like topology. And we'll probably get a lot of examples, or no. Facial topology. So again, we want radial topology around the mouth and the eye sockets, and then probably just kind of indicate where the nasolabial fold would kind of flow here. just to get natural deformations in animation. So I mean, this would vary depending on the character, but typically a nice thing to do would be to start either at the eye socket or around the mouth. So just start establishing this inner pattern. So I would suggest not, so I can use middle mouse button to, or I guess even left mouse button. Yeah, it's very intuitive. I like this tool. So I would encourage you not to do too many of these points. Just kind of keep a modest number. And then shift, I can just start placing. So there I've created that initial face path, the initial edge flow. So this will be a huge puzzle. That's why I'm saying probably not going to sit here and do it. If you really want it to be, I mean, I recommend trying it at least once or twice, regardless. It's a very interesting exercise. But then you'd build it up. So here you just keep expanding on that initial group. So you see it will get quite low poly. But then if I want to insert an extra edge loop somewhere, I just hold control and it will insert the edge loop. That's why you can actually start pretty low. It will be easier because you're establishing the initial flow. And then I'm also considerate of, I do want to have a sort of a dividing middle line. So this will be my middle on X0. So placing the vertices. And then actually you can hold shift and just left mouse button, it will relax. It's kind of smoothing out. So I'm probably going to insert one more edge loop that would go out from here eventually. So if you see that you need more edge loops, I'm just going to insert it, but try to keep that number kind of low. And here the puzzle would become, how do we connect this with the nasolabial fold? And you see here, Sidant has actually sculpted this quite nicely because it actually folds over the nose. So kind of a mistake a lot of people would do is to make this fold, like have its origin here, like then it's actually not folding over, which it does and should do for, again, for natural deformations. If you have facial animation, you want, that's the whole purpose of doing this, is to have as natural deformations as you can. Okay. And yeah, so we just start building this out. And this is a puzzle, and my brain is particularly bad at this, so. But you might have a brain which would delight at this task. So it's like figuring out this puzzle, but I could do, you can establish, like I really want this flow down here and I know that, so I can establish that, right? I know that I need that. So now we're off, and then I could do the same here. Just keep a modest number, and then gradually, you'd kind of finish the puzzle, and then you see it's relatively quick. It's probably not gonna, and I'm not sure in Maya, but in Topogen I used to be able to duplicate that over and it would mirror, or it would snap to the, I'm not sure here, because this is not a symmetrical model, so that's the other thing. Like I mean, this is a conceptual sculpt, and we do want asymmetry in there. But so arguably, it would be easier for you technically if you don't have symmetry, then retopologize it, then add asymmetry, right? But this being a conceptual sculpt, is actually most often you will not have symmetry in the conceptual sculpt. And so I don't think there's any advice. I think the best thing is just to really focus on the artwork that what Sidant has done, and then okay, so if it's going to take a little longer technically, then do it. It's probably worth it. So, but let's, I'll leave you with that. You know, that's kind of, you make the object live, pressing that magnet. This could be for anything. Could not necessarily only a character, but you know. And then just press it again. Now it's not live anymore, and I can select it. I can Control H hide it. This is eventually what you'll be left with, just kind of gradually a mesh, which would be the character. So, but let's quickly also look at the automated retopology function here. C remesher. So I'm just going to copy the thing, or duplicate. Make a duplicate of the mesh. And you, under geometry, there's C remesher. Let's run it. We'll see just initially what we get. So typically this is it's, you know, it's automated. So we can just run it, see what we get, and typically keep doing that. I mean, do some iterations, probably the best way to go. You're rarely going to get like the perfect result. And I think if you alt-click C remesher, it will do an alternate algorithm. Then you'll get a slightly different result. But let's just see what it does. And we can also guide it using some guide curves that we can literally draw on top of the mesh. We can try to do that. Some C remesher guide curves. But this could be a lifesaver. It's certainly interesting. You probably take it like 90% there and then perfect it. You know, that would be my way to do it. So it used to be, so it's definitely messed up the mouth. So that there would be a lot of manual tweaking there. And depending on what you'd like the mouth to do, if you want to have an animation where it could open, then you'd probably want to sculpt it that way, right? So you do, um, but essentially this is what you want. So you want a completely closed mesh. So inside the eye sockets, you see there, it's kind of like just an internal little room in there, and it's contained, and it's just a complete mesh. There are no holes in the mesh, because and that also has to do with lighting. So you just want a completely closed mesh. So if you were to sculpt the mouth, you would do the similar thing for the mouth cavity. So as Siddhant has done for the eye sockets, you just make a cavity there in the sculpt, and then you, like you did for the eyeballs, you would add separate objects for gums and teeth, right? That they would be separate subtools just put inside of that cavity. But the mouth socket itself would just be kind of like that, just an open cavity. But so this is not perfect. Well, okay, this is better than it seemed, because the problem here used to be that it would create spirals. So we never want spirals to happen. Let's see. So if you hold Control Shift, I can do this to only view that selection. So Control Shift drag. So maybe we can ship this over to Maya and have a look at it there. But that's an initial attempt. It's not perfect. See, this is strange. And again, we don't have that radial topology around the mouth. We have it around the eyes seem to work quite nicely with some exceptions. So this would need more work and would need more tweaking, but depending on what it is that you do, if it is a production mesh that you want to be animated, you would need to put a whole lot more effort into it than if it's a static. It could be a statue or something, in which case, well, maybe it's also animated, but if it's a static statue, none of this would really matter, right? So it's all about that animation-friendly topology. So let's look at the C-Remesher guide curves. These guys. So here you literally draw out, I'm just gonna fill this with a white color. Yeah, so you literally draw out some guides. So if I want to guide it, let's say that just want to kind of establish that radial pattern here. Let me try again. Like that. Maybe I want to just tell it that, okay, I want the nasolabial fold here. And then we could establish the radial pattern around the mouth. And this, again, would be experimental. You have to run it, you have to see what it does, you probably have to do it again or 10 times. And eventually you might end up with a mesh that's actually kind of even like the way you want it, or maybe 90% there, and then you can tweak it manually afterwards. So all right, so it seems like well, we can try to run it now and see if we get a difference. So I just keep making copies of them, like before I do the operation. So I have the copy right there. There's also a way to use polypaint. This has to do with mesh density. So this is more useful for like a full body creature where everything is one mesh, but then you'd want more polys for the face and then less for the rest of the body. So areas of interest would have more polys. Then you can actually use polypaint, and I think it's yeah. So red would be dense, more dense, and blue or no color. Anyways, yeah, it's just right there. So, but this would then have to be enabled, and it would also factor that in. So it would vary the poly count or the polygonal density depending on the polypaint. It's very interesting. All right, so let's run this. So, but the fail-safe way of getting perfect topology is obviously doing it yourself in Maya, which works, just takes time. But if we can somehow trick this thing into behaving, let's see. So Shift F, turn on the wireframe. So we definitely introduced more of a radial topology here. It's looking interesting. It's not perfect. But you get the idea. We probably could have introduced more. So it's totally, I mean, if we compare it to, did I delete it? No, there's the previous one. See, we didn't really have that radial topology at all. It's just kind of a mess. Goes like comes down here, and then this doesn't make sense. Then here we've established that radial topology, and probably we would have. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's pretty interesting. It's definitely a huge improvement. We have. Yeah, we also sort of have a topology here for the labial fold, nasal labial fold, kind of. And we have radial topology. It seems around the eyes are pretty successful. You see, this is not bad. I mean, this is kind of strange. It's probably unnecessary. This could just flow naturally. So you'd have to just apply your own judgment, and then probably we could have just introduced like a few ZBrush guide curves along here and telling it, no, just go straight here, go straight across here. It probably would have done that. So you see, with a few tweaks, then you can help it along with ZBrush guide curves. Yeah, this is very interesting. This is not bad. This would save you, you know, at least half a day or a day's work, which is worth it. And I mean, eventually, if the AI algorithm will just look at this and say, yeah, there are eyes and a nose and a mouth, and just give you topology. And I don't know why we don't have that yet. We should. But it would be something arguably very simple, I guess, for an AI to do. So, but let's be happy with that. I'm just going to save this. Oh, I don't need the undo history. So if you don't want to save the undo history, just uncheck that. And then okay, so let's also do what we looked at yesterday, which was like this was the first step. We have a retopologized version. So the next step would be to make UVs and to bake the information from the high sculpt down to the retopologized version. So let's take a little break. Let's take a little break. Take 10 minutes. We'll be back. Yeah. All right. I wanted to take this out of here and UV map it in headers and bring it back just to show you that you can work between things. There's a really good UV master here. You can basically do your UV unwrapping also in ZBrush. It can work with polygroups. So if you haven't tried polygroups, there's a polygroup feature here, and we could have masked it and started making polygroups and used it that way. So we could get back to that, but I sort of want to emphasize the point of bringing things out of ZBrush, and don't be afraid to work wherever you want. Also in Maya if you want to. But I couldn't get headers to open here, so I'm going to export this, just do the UVs, just an automatic thing. So I'm exporting an OBJ. I'm going to put it in here. So there's our original. So dude retopo. There's the retopologized version. Then we could have fixed things here. We could have spent more time, as I hope you understand. You can just do whatever you want to the mesh. It's a completely normal mesh. But you see, this is pretty good for an automatic thing. It's not bad. So, so then you then would have spent more or less time with the UVs, make the UVs perfect. Technically, as long as we will be baking in ZBrush, the UVs, of course, they matter, but technically, you don't have to worry so much about seams because we won't really see them. Anyways, so even if you do an automatic mapping here, which is crazy, it's not nice, it's very ugly, and you will never do that because we do want nice UV shells. Like human readable UVs are still nice to have because you can open the UVs and look at them and understand what you're looking at. So if you're comfortable UV mapping in Hedis, which I am, and that's where I do my UV mapping, you'll do that. If you're comfortable UV mapping in Maya, you can do that. And Maya's gotten pretty good now with UV mapping. Or in ZBrush, which also has really good UV mapping features. So I wanted to do this in Hedis. That's my home for UVs, but didn't work. So, but just to show you, you can actually do this. This is technically okay because there are no UVs outside 0 to 1, which would be a problem even if this UV happened to be there. Oh no, that's a big problem, although it's a small change. That could literally cause the bake not to work. Also, if any of these are overlapping ever so slightly, so if this UV happened to be there, that's a big problem. So, and you would never notice, or you would take you hours to troubleshoot, perhaps, right? Because you don't know what went wrong. It could be an infinite number of things. So that's one crucial thing to bear in mind, to not have overlapping UVs and have all the UVs be inside 0 to 1. And then try to make nice UVs. I'm not going to do that now, but at least it has UVs. And I'm going to delete history. Okay, so there's UVs, and then I'm going to export it. So we just replace that so that now that OBJ is updated with UVs. And ZBrush will actually recognize this as long as I'm in edit mode. I'm looking at this mesh with the exact same poly count, and I'm importing this to the same actively engaged subtool. ZBrush will understand that, well, it's the same thing, and it seems like nothing happens, but when I hit Control D, so Control D is to add subdivisions, right? It's not Dynamesh, but it's just adding normal subdivisions, like hitting smooth in Maya. So Control D, or not. Why is that not working? That's strange. Let me hit. Oh, it does not want us. Okay. That's odd. Mesh contains triangles. Why can I not divide it? Okay, so there it divides. I'm not sure why. It seemed to have some sort of beef with the other one. But usually then it should, if you're on the same subtool, you're importing basically the same model and then hit Control D. it will update the UVs. But okay, fine. Didn't want to do that. But so I just imported it manually. I switched to the simple brush and I hit import, and I just imported that do not switch dude Retopo mesh. Okay, so it's in here, and then I can go back to this project that I was, or this C tool that I was working with. So here, this is the currently active C tool. The C tool is your model with all its subtools, right? If I want to import something else, like an OBJ or something, I can, for instance, just click here on the simple brush. I usually do that. Just, and yes, switch. Now the simple brush is the active one. Okay, so the logic is if I import something now, it's not going to just import and replace the simple brush because the simple brush cannot be replaced. Right? But if I imported it while this were selected, it would just replace that subtool. Make sense? Or no, it wouldn't. It would add it to its subtools. Right, anyways. But yeah, you get the idea. So here, this is my other imported guy. So if I click there, now it's selected and it has no subtools. It's just, that's it. But I can now append this guy into the other tool. And to do that, I click this guy again. Now this is selected with its subtools. And I can go append. Do you see append? There it is. Append. And I can append something else that's in ZBrush. So there's the dude Retopo. I'm going to append it. And now it should be in here. Is it that one? Probably. And I added one level of subdivision. Oh, it's not that one. Ah. I'm getting confused. There's too much stuff going on. I thought it was that one. Anyways, let's pretend it was that one. It's also a little annoying with this clipped monitor. Let's see what I don't need here. All right, let's just keep it. I have this guy, retopologized version. I need now to add more subdivisions to it because we're going to bake, or we're going to project the details from the high poly one down to the low poly one. Because when you do the retopologizing, obviously you're going to lose a lot of the detail potentially that you had in your concept sculpt. And so if you want to keep that, you need to project it back down. So I'm going to divide. Why is it not dividing? Oh, we're actually not looking at it. Okay. So now it has a poly count of 479,000, and Sidan's original had 287,000. So this is more than enough. So again, what I want to do is I want to place this. These buttons right here is to move it either one up or one down in the hierarchy of subtools. This one will move it to the top, this one will move it to the bottom. But I just want to place it right underneath the original. And then I do want the original to be active. Oh, okay, so one little thing we can do also before we do that is just to double check that this is the right mesh. And I want to see if the UVs are there. So I'm just going to go back to the lowest level. So Shift D, Shift D, Shift D. Go back to UV map and morph UV. So there are the horrible UVs, but at least it has UVs. So just double check, because we need UVs, otherwise there will be nothing to eventually export the normal map to. Right, so all right, so we just want to go up the levels again to a sufficient poly count, and that's it. And this one needs to be visible, the one that you're projecting from, and the one you're projecting to should be selected as a subtool. And that should be fine. And just hide everything else, just, And then project all. And sometimes you might have to adjust the search distance depending on your mesh. If you see some artifacts, this would be my go-to setting. Just increase it ever so slightly. You see that it's set very, very low, 0.02. So if you try setting it to 0.1, 0.2, if you're experiencing clipping, like some of the details are clipped, just try to increase that. Okay. I think we can also, since this has poly paint, should be able to also project that. I don't really do that. Well, let's see. Project all. Okay, so one, oh yeah, so here, one or more of the visible subtools contains polypaint data. Would you like to project polypainting? Yes. So it's going to also try to project the paint down. Yep, so it seems to be done. So that's the new version. This is the original, so you see there's no difference. But the difference is that this has completely new topology, so Shift D, 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 go down to this level. So yeah. So everything is baked down, so even if you do poly painting, you can bake it down. And that also means that we can now export the poly paint as a texture map based on the UVs. So maybe I should save this scene. And then, yep, we're going to try to bake. So we'll go C plugin, multi-map exporter. So I can dock that menu over here. So we want a normal map. If you see more of these are enabled, just disable them. So we just want the normal map. We also want the poly paint. I think, yeah, okay, right here, texture from poly paint. So it's going to export normal map. It's also going to export a texture map from the poly paint. Currently it's set to 2K. I guess we could do 4K. It's going to flip it vertically on export. We do want that. So for the normal map settings, yeah, so tangent space, normal map, adaptive mode can be enabled. It will just take a little, it will do a better job. Smooth normals, yes. That's good. And I guess let's try it. So create all maps. And it's going to be a TIFF. I don't know which one I'm renaming here though, or naming. Is it? Okay, let's just save it. We'll name it afterwards. Yep. The cavity map creates a mask inside of all the cavities, inside all the little indents. Hmm. Yeah, but I don't know how much don't have. Yeah, I mean you can. Essentially, you don't have too much of control over it. So what you could do is do it manually, like I showed you last time, and then just export that as polypaint, and then there's your cavity map. But then you have much more control. Uh, whereas a normal map, you don't really want to be painting anything anyways. It's just not human. Humans don't do that. Computers do that. And so, yeah. And so here are my files. So I don't know how to fix the naming there. It always kind of messes it up. I don't know, from the exporter, but so I usually just name it afterwards. Just get it out of there. So there's the tangent space normal map. So initially it kind of looks okay. It looks like a normal map. No, you're just gonna have to apply it and see, but it looks like a good bake. You know, it looks kind of. We don't see any glaring artifacts except for like small ones like here. Maybe. No, maybe not. Let's try. These are not forgiving UVs. So this is the most horrible UV solution ever. Like it's very, very bad. We have a lot of seams everywhere. Yep. So dude, normal map. Let's also look at the color map. That's the color map. Okay, so dude, color. Oh, let's just assign them to a blend. So again, get into the habit of making Maya projects. Nope. And then all the files that actually go into, did I just do that or didn't I? So it went to here. No, that's the wrong one. No, dude, whatever. So all image files that actually go into a material, we do want to place those in source images. So I'm going to copy those. This is my Maya project in here. They're both TIFFs, which is okay. So uncompressed format. So I'm going to make a blend just for simplicity. Let's see if this will work. Dude, color. Press number 6. Yay. So very faceted kind of look, but we can go and do mesh display, soften edge, and we should be looking at the same thing here as here. So it's kind of, you look at the poly paint, it does have that kind of look, and this is just due to a limited poly count in ZBrush. So when you're poly painting, you really need a lot of vertices. So that's predictable, very good. So then for the normal map, do a bump map node, go to File, set it to tangent space normals, and we'll follow here. I'm going to turn off the filter type, select the normal map, and then one thing we're going to do is we're going to change the color space from sRGB to raw, and the color map should work. So we can go 5, that's the standard shaded model, 6. So let me, oh yeah, just gonna, if you want to copy the entire network, like not just the material, but also its inputs, you can go edit and duplicate shading network. It will also copy all the incoming textures. But yeah, just so you know. But here, actually, I want to, on this guy, I can break color. To only see the normal map. Yep. So that worked very, very nicely. Very good. Are there any questions? So this is basically your assignment. Assignment 2 from the updated version of the plan, which I will put online. But I made it easier. The full body thing is optional. You don't have to do it. I encourage you to do it. It will be fun to do. Yes. But this is mandatory for the course. You do need to make a production model of the bust. And yeah, it should be doable. You can go crazy with it and add accessories. And obviously then it would be the same process. So we just export different objects out of ZBrush. So the eyeballs here, we can just export them. We don't have to do much to them, I hope. So dude, eyeballs, or eyes. And all the objects you would have, just export them, import them, and they should pop right into place. Oh, I imported the wrong thing. Eyeballs. Yep, there are the eyeballs. So all accessories you'd have, everything should work just predictably, going back and forth. Yes. So for you games people, if you want to throw this into Unity or Unreal or any game engine, there's your mesh, and you have the normal map, you have the color map. Should be fine. Just try it, see how that would appear in game, and just go lower on the Siri mesher if you want to lower res, or do it manually. It's not simple to do. I think once you did everything you did yesterday, I think that went pretty well for those of you who were here. There were not a lot of people there. If not, I would definitely start with something just to understand. Where's the thing? AI standard here. It's, no, okay. For Arnold, yeah, we'll hold off with that. For VFX people, we're going to be doing the same thing, but with 32-bit displacement maps. So it would be very similar, just, yeah, different. Also, like multi-UDIM UVs. Have you heard of that? No. Who's talking? You're talking? Yes. Yeah, exactly. And why would you do that? Yeah, it's actually to use more image maps on one single mesh. So instead of creating like, okay, if you have a hero, creature, or character for a VFX render, you could be talking about a total texture resolution of like literally, it could be like 100 4K maps. or anywhere in between, depending on. You would have to sort of calculate your need based on how close the camera would get to the character, and whether if it's 4K render or and then you double shoot so you don't can go a little bit closer. You never want to see pixelated results. Oh, just pointing that out. Look how beautifully that worked, even with these crappy UVs. Because the UVs are all over the place. We have seams everywhere. But essentially, it should be okay, because this is just baked based on 3D data. It's the data in ZBrush is in 3D. The same would be for Substance Painter. If you're texturing there, that's like a 3D texturing thing. But yeah, where was I? So UDIMs. Yeah, you're right. So it's just like spreading it out into, these are UDIMs. So this would, you can go 10 that way and upward, like have a lot of UDIMs. And so it's just like data management. And you wouldn't really need to do that if you had just a whole bunch of different objects. But it's really if the one and the same mesh needs to have a really, really high texture resolution, which would be the case for a creature. It's kind of a huge mesh, like it's one continuous body, and then all of that thing needs to have a really large texture resolution. Then you'd need to do UDIMs. So we're going to do that. That would be later, and we'll set it up with UDIMs and try to render it with Arnold. So if up until then, that would be like in November, if some of you would want to try like to do a creature or a full body, and you have something that you would like to try to render in Arnold, that would be the time to try it in November. So that's like in a month, more or less. So if in 5 weeks, should be doable if some of you would like to have a large creature or dinosaur or whatever you want to do. Start working on that. Should be interesting. Then you also have the optional one done, which I recommend doing. It would be fun. Okay, so I think that's it. Any questions? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can show you anything. You mean in Maya, how to apply it? Right, so the first thing I did was I made a material. So I make a Blinn, named after Jim Blinn. You know Jim Blinn? The University of Utah in the 70s? Oh yeah. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. You see the new old teapot, right? No, it's not his teapot. It's a guy called Newell. He was British. He was also part of the Utah team. But he worked with Jim Blinn. Now this is the original. And Jim Blinn, yeah, so they basically improved. This is a reflection made by an image that's actually around the object. I guess it's like image-based lighting and reflection. We still do that, which is cool. So this is a little. These windows were actually painted by Jim Blinn in a paint program he had to write in order to make it. Yeah. So a lot of things happened in the 70s in Utah. So that's Blinn. Anyways, make a Blinn. I would say bless you, but I'm atheist. Bump mapping. Click there. File. Change. No longer do we want a bump map. We want a tangent space. Very important to set it to tangent space. Then, where it says bump value, you see this has an incoming connection. This, we follow it here. Click. It takes us to the file node. This is the node in which we will find the file. So click here. It should open the file browser. There's the file. because I put it directly in source images in my Maya project, which I made. You should make a Maya project. You'll get a source images folder, put it in there. Everything will be nice. Select it. And then it doesn't look right. Doesn't look right. So we have to go to color space. This is technically an sRGB image, but we want to tell Maya that it's not. So just go set it to raw. Nice. You can. I always just do that. So the filter is kind of, well, you see, basically blur. Okay, so it's to prevent flickering in animation and so forth. So, depending on the TD or whoever, if you're rendering, I don't know, maybe you want it. I just always turn it off for look dev because I don't want blurry things. Yep. But essentially it's for that purpose, like filtering for flickering and things. So I don't know, maybe in some cases you'd want that. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes. Hmm. Right. But I think the same goes for definitely normal maps and displacement maps. There would be no reason to have a filter. It's only for, yeah, I guess for color maps. But I don't know. This would be a question maybe for a compositor, something like a render dude. Yeah. Yeah, so I always turn them off. I don't want the blur, and then yes. Yeah, good. Anything else? So to see what just happened, we can just open here, see there's the blend I made. It's called blend 3. And I can click here. It will graph the input connections off that material. If I click there, this is what's going on. This is what I just did. So I have the material. How can I do that? No. Can I do that? No. There are all these buttons. I don't know what they do. They keep making new buttons. How do I hide? Anyways, so you'll see here. Okay, I can go like that. There we go. There's the material. Here's the bump node. The bump node, when we're using a bump map, which you probably tried in the past, that was at the bump. Now it's a tangent space normal. Here's the file node. It just contains the path to the file. It's the color space, raw. And this is the place 2D texture node. It only, essentially, if you're dealing with tileable textures or seamless textures, you can repeat the UVs. Have you tried that? Some people. Which we never want to do for something like this because it's a one image map. If we tile it, it will just tile several times over the model. So we can tile it like 10 times 10. Now it's tiling. Makes no sense. But that's for seamless textures. So we can apply huge areas with a seamless texture, and then it will just fill. Yep. Yes. Yep. What's that? What did I tell you about yesterday? Oh yeah. Yeah. So you don't have to think about that when you're using the multi-map exporter because it is set to flip on export. So where is it? There. So this little button, flip V, it flips all the maps vertically on export because ZBrush has its UVs upside down, basically. It's the same as RenderMan, I think. And this is why they still have it. But it's unlike anything else. So it's just stupid. But it just flips it. No. So if you don't use the multi-map exporter, you would have to be aware of that. So if I go and, for instance, if I go to texture map, create, hang on. What happened to my UVs? This is not the right subtool. Dude. There's dude Retopo. This should be the right one. So I could go texture map, new from polypaint. That will generate the map based on the polypaint. If I go clone texture, it will be here and I can export it. This would be upside down. Then I would either have to flip it here or just flip it anytime in Photoshop. So yeah, so you do need to be aware of that. So see, upside down. But yeah, so if your textures look completely wrong, just remember that if you do export it manually, you have to flip it. Anything else? Yes. Mm-hmm. You can dive into it from the same mesh. Um, I would just. Did you watch any of the tutorials on the ZBrush Summit thing that I posted? Because there are many different approaches. One approach is to use. Let me just initialize. We have something called mannequins, or you could just import like a starting mesh if you want to, or just start from a sphere and keep building whatever you want to do, or just separate volumes, put them together, and then dynamesh the thing. But here, if you go to project, yeah, there are some basic figures in here that you could use as a starting point. Here are the mannequins. Click there. This is cool. You have some mannequin starting point. So it's like say a simple Ryan Kingsley. Yeah, he has. Yep. So this is it's based around a ZBrush armature. So yeah, a lot of people still use ZBrush armatures or Z-sphere armatures. And that's the way these mannequins are built. But with Dynamesh now, you can do whatever you want. It's like, but this is also cool because now you have this armature, and the way these Z-spheres work, well, you can sort of tell. I can grab them and move them around, and I'm building more or less as you would if you were sculpting traditionally, like you build an armature. You know, it's just yep. And then whatever you want to do, so you can change this pretty radically if you want. So, like, you know, it's fun. But yeah, so personally, yeah, it's a nice starting point. But no, there's no right or wrong way. It's like there's so many different approaches. But anyways, so there you have that, and then you could turn that into an adaptive skin. That's just here under the tool menu. See how this works again. Preview. Make adaptive skin. Did that do it? I think so. Well, let's see. And then I think now we can just go, and now it's Dynamesh. And then, yeah, so then you can sculpt. So that's pretty cool. It's a mannequin, you can make an armature, now we can sculpt. So make adaptive skin. Now I can just keep, so I thought, oh, this, okay, this might have to do with, back face mask. Yeah, okay. So that little thing that just happened, that was good that happened because this is a kind of an important feature. So here, initially, you see the clay built up brush. So I'm trying to sculpt, and it kind of pulls the back of the head with it, and I don't want that to happen. I could have avoided it. I could have gone in here and just like carefully build it up, no problem. But if you really want to avoid that, and it's a very useful setting under brush masking, auto masking, back face mask. This will not affect the back faces. So it's like when I'm sculpting, I'm affecting the front or what I'm looking at. This is very useful. So there are more settings to any brush. Like there's a lot of settings. You can adjust anything. The curve of how the brush would affect the surface. So yeah, and then, here we go. So back to paying attention to anatomy. Anyone remember this muscle? Sternocleidomastoid going down, and then trapezius, lower, upper, and then probably want some deltoids like the shoulder. Even if you're doing like a creature, yeah, you want to think about that if you want to base it on human anatomy or animal anatomy or a mixture. So you see, even though it's such a crude starting point anyways, it's just to get you going. And then you could like combine this with some references, potentially. Yep. Yeah, so but the mannequins are cool for a rough starting point. So I like working with the move brush, moving sections around. So I'm just playing with the silhouette, like in the initial stages. So if you if you go to the background range, we can make the background more like a uniform color. I prefer that. So I usually do that, document, background. Yep. Which? Yeah, you can customize this any way you want. And there are some quick ones here, like interface colors. Yeah, you can look really cool. Whoa, right? It's like, wow, you're really good. And then you can have different interfaces. A lot of people do that, you have your customized interface. So I feel at home in the traditional one. Yes. And a lot of people don't customize their interface. But there are ones here that are actually kind of more useful. So some of these you can have your most useful brushes at the bottom, which is nice. So yeah, since I teach a lot, I kind of just leave it like standard. But you can click here. Now I'm lost. There's too much. And then tab, you can get rid of that while you're sculpting at least. Oh, and one more thing that's actually kind of important. So here it's not an issue, but on the lab or any kind of, if you're working with a larger resolution, you might want to double the document size. So I usually do that. So yes. that looks weird, but then I can click Control N, new document. I draw this in again. Press T to go to edit mode, like that. So, yeah, and then I also like to turn down the range because now you'll have a larger area to work with. Like it will fill your monitor. Yeah. It's because the way ZBrush originally was intended is it's actually a illustration tool. It's a illustrator tool. So you can look at it as kind of the way it was intended to be kind of a Photoshop with 3D. So when I drop these down to the canvas, they're they're no longer, they're kind of a mixture of 2D and 3D. They exist here in this document, which has pixels with depth information. So, which they call pixels. This is the document. So now I made an artwork, right? So that's why then you can you set the size of the document, which is the artwork. So it's unlike the viewport in Maya. This is more like a canvas, a document, and then yeah, it's useless, but that's the reason. It's still kind of this way. So the document you can't really. You can save it. I never do that. It just saves this. This is the document. But the way most people use ZBrush, we don't use that. So Control N. But there are a lot of tools only for that purpose, like to work in 2.5D more or less. Since I never use them, I don't even. Where are they? Yeah, I don't even know. Used to be here. They removed them. So you see, I guess they're just kind of true to their core. You know, the way I like Pixel Logic. They do their own thing, and it's like, yeah, you don't like it? Yeah, pick something else. But it's the best software for sculpting. It's just amazing. And they're just a small group of people at the Nomen campus. That's where they're at. Pretty interesting company. And Autodesk has not bought them, which is, I don't think they're for sale. Yeah, so then keep fleshing things out. This is now standard Dynamesh, and off you go. Yeah. And there are no right or wrong way. You can just keep noodling, or just start with a sphere, or start with several spheres and volumes, and put them together. So one of the videos that I actually posted is a guy called Danny Williams. On Canvas. So this is from a ZBrush summit like a few years ago, but he still uses Dynamesh.
I started this character, and one of the ways that I like to start characters, if I'm working from strong concept, you know, either that I generate or I get from someone else, I try to not necessarily start this way, because things like proportions are already.
Oh, I gotta. Yep. So the best thing to do also start looking at various artists working. Look at tutorials. Look at the ZBrush summit right now happening at night. Any other questions? Yep. Yes, potentially, if people will show up. Will you show up? I was counting people to see if we could fit everyone in now, which would be nice. Are you busy before that? Okay, right. That's the thing. That's why they've scheduled this horrible schedule, because you guys are busy. What are you gonna do? You're busy, you're busy. Crap. Questions? No. So, yes, okay. When is the first group in there, it says? 12? Yeah. Let's do 12:15 again. See you there. And I think you can actually do this probably today if you decide to try to finish the bust, at least to have a version of it. That could be interesting. All right.